All right, well, let's go ahead and get started today. Thank you guys so much for joining us. My name is Maggie Knowles. I'm with Disability Rights South Carolina, and you have joined us for Accessible Voting 101. And today we're going to be talking about making a voting plan. Just a few things to go over before we welcome our speaker. Number one, this session is being recorded. It will be placed on YouTube after it has been made fully accessible. We've also placed automatically all the participants on mute. We will have a chance for questions after the presentation today. So if you have a question, you can go ahead and put it in the chat, or you can raise your hand, but we'll get to that at the end of the presentation. If you do have a question that's of a more personal nature, that somehow you want to ask, but maybe this isn't the right place to ask that question, please feel free to contact us directly. At the end of the presentation, our contact information will be up and you can call or email or TTY, and one of us will be available to answer those questions. In the chat box, there will also be a link to a survey for our webinar today, and we encourage you to please fill that out for us. Give us some additional information about how you think it went and how we can improve our presentations for the future. And if you will go to the next slide, I just wanted to touch base. Oh, I'm sorry, can you go one down? There we go, I put that in the wrong order. Just wanted to touch base that we have lots of upcoming webinars scheduled next month. We will be talking about accessible housing. After that, the ADA. In May, we will have a special session that will be kind of an introduction to what DRSC does, and the entire session will be in Spanish. So we hope that you will join us for some of these next ones. You can find details of these on our website. So now I'm going to introduce Erin Hare. She is our voting rights expert, as well as many other hats that she wears here at Disability Rights South Carolina. And she will be talking to us about getting ready for a busy election season. Erin.
Thanks everyone for being here. Phil, could we go back one slide? There we go. I think I see some familiar faces. We have a small group, but this is being recorded, and we want this to be available for folks who are looking to make a voting plan for themselves. So just a little bit about Disability Rights South Carolina as a group. Some of our service areas. We are a nonprofit. We provide free services statewide. Call us. We do have intake and referral services. We'll talk a little bit more about that throughout the presentation. And you'll never get a bill from us or anything like that for our services. We are mandated by state and federal law to protect the rights of people with disabilities in South Carolina. We mention that because we do get state and federal funds, but we work independently of the state agencies. Oftentimes we partner with state agencies, we work alongside them, but every once in a while we do have to be kind of in an adversarial relationship. So we like to tell folks that we work with them, but are not bound to them in that way. Our mission is to protect and advance the legal, civil, and human rights of people with disabilities in South Carolina. And we were known for a very long time as Protection and Advocacy for People with Disabilities, P&A. So if you hear anybody referring to P&A, that is us in the state of South Carolina. Every state has a protection and advocacy organization that gets kind of the same funding that we do. So you might hear that term bandied around in terms of other states, but we are the protection and advocacy organization for South Carolina. Okay, go to the next slide and maybe skip that. Perfect. We provide information and referral services. So our INR team is who you're going to get if you dial one of our general information numbers, or if you send an email to our info email. Those folks are kind of our front lines. You're going to give them some information. They might do something like refer you out to one of our partner organizations. They might give you some information that helps you handle your issue on your own, or they might refer it back internally for our examination. In very limited cases, we do provide legal support. We do a lot of education and outreach, kind of like this series that we're doing currently. And I am the outreach person. You can, if you think that your organization would benefit from a session about voting, or a session about guardianship, or a session about education, you can reach out to me and we'll see if we can't get somebody out to provide that. We do monitoring and investigations of abuse and neglect in the community, in state-run facilities, and that also includes corrections. And then we do a good amount of public policy work, advocating for bills and measures that would benefit our clients and people with disabilities statewide. That's a little bit about us. I think now we can go to the next slide. What is a voting plan? So this language kind of popped up in 2020 when COVID was first hitting, and we were kind of all wondering what we were going to do about elections and how we were going to have elections in the middle of a pandemic. What accommodations were we going to have? And it became very clear to a lot of folks in the disability community that we were going to need to provide some support for folks who wanted to go vote, let them know what their options were, and kind of have it planned out. Specific steps to ensure you can cast your vote successfully and in a way that's easy for you, in a way that doesn't cause you stress, in a way that makes you feel confident about going to the polls. So we can go to the next slide. Why a voting plan is important. Voting involves a lot of steps. We're going to talk about all those steps here in the session and kind of enumerate the steps within the steps, what you need. There's going to be a lot that we don't have time to get to today because it is fairly complicated, and it's obviously made more complicated if you have a disability. Deadlines matter. If you miss a deadline, it's very, very difficult to walk that back and kind of be able to cast your vote if you haven't hit those certain deadlines. Things can change without notice. And we saw this a lot in 2020, where there were some lawsuits that were happening. There were legislators that were advocating for changes, and it went back and forth a lot. The requirements for absentee balloting, or what you needed to have with you at the polls, and where you were going to vote. Hopefully, because we're have learned to live with COVID, things will not be as variable, but things can change without notice. And so if you're already have in your mind what you're going to do, it makes things much easier and a lot less stressful. And if you have a disability, there are probably barriers to vote. We at Disability Rights South Carolina do not believe that there is, in the state of South Carolina, any 100% accessible form of voting. So whatever method we talk about today, and you come to the conclusion that that's how I feel good about voting, that's what I want to do, we're going to talk about some of the barriers that are inherent to each method of voting. And we can go to the next slide. When you're making a voting plan, these are kind of the things that you should keep in mind. And we're going to go through all these questions and discuss them. And also, I want to encourage people, and I'll say this a bunch more times, if you have any questions about individual parts of this, or you want to discuss with someone how to make your voting plan, the details of this, please do give us a call. You're most likely going to get to me unless it's kind of a very general question that our intake folks can answer. but I love to talk to folks about their voting plan. It's one of my favorite things to do is to talk through these issues, and don't worry about, whether or not your issue is small. Call and we'll talk it out. So when you're making a voting plan, you first want to think, am I registered to vote? We'll go through the steps and who's eligible. But of course, you first in South Carolina need to be registered to vote, and you have to be registered to vote in advance of the election. When will I vote? This is something that could change leading up to the 2022 general election. But if you're a person with disabilities, you have options as to when you can vote leading up to the election. Will I vote in person? There are options to vote in person. It's not just voting at your precinct on election day. And then of course there is mail-in absentee voting that you can take advantage of if you're a person with a disability. Where will I vote? Finding your precinct is something that is often challenging. Sometimes precincts change. You might want to go vote in person early, and then that changes where you vote. So we'll talk about all that. Can I have assistance when voting? That's something you want to think about because it can kind of inform the ease with which you vote and might mean that you want to vote in a different way. And then lastly, do I have all the documents I need? That's something that, again, might change before we get to election day. But we'll discuss what currently the laws are about what documents you need to vote, when you have them, and what qualifies as proper documentation. We can go ahead. Am I registered to vote? In South Carolina, you have to be registered to vote at least 30 days before the election. And I've got a slide that tells you exactly what those dates are later in the program. Registration, you can download a form online and then you can mail, fax. Yes, it's still a thing. If you have a fax machine in your closet and that's still operational, it's still a thing. Or you can drop it off at your county election office. You can also do it in person at your county election office. Sometimes this is easier because we find the county election offices to be more physically accessible than some of your precincts. So it might be a good option if you have questions about the registration form or you need some assistance. You'll need a driver's license or a state issued ID. So you do have to have ID to register to vote. And if you have a question about your eligibility or someone else's, or you need some assistance with the form, because the form can be a little bit complicated. It's not always, when I saw the first one, I was like, what do I put where? So, it's perfectly reasonable to want some assistance just to make sure you're filling it out properly. And if you have questions about eligibility, give us a call. Mostly it's pretty clear. If you're, say you're a formerly incarcerated person, that's a situation where it gets a little bit complicated. So we would love for you to give us a call. If you have family members, give us a call and we can talk through it and figure out what your options are, what your eligibility is. Okay, we can go to the next one. Check your registration. This became kind of a hot topic in the last election, and I'll tell you that it is very important to check your voter registration for a couple reasons. One, the process to register is a little bit complicated, and especially if you're mailing in your registration, you want to make sure it's arrived and that everything has gotten processed as it should be, and that everything is cool, you're registered, you got no problems. Also, South Carolina law says that if you have gone inactive, that is, you didn't vote in 2 general elections, that you're eligible, not definitely will be, but eligible to be put on a kind of probationary status, which means if you miss another general election, you're eligible to be taken off the rolls. We're not really sure how often this happens, but the fact that you're eligible and it's possible makes it important to check your registration. So it's very simple. SC Votes, we'll put that link up later in the, and we'll come back to the screen also later in the presentation. It's very, very simple. You check your voter registration. It'll tell you if it's up to date, and then it'll tell you if it's not, who to call and how to resolve that. So it's very, very important to check your registration. For people with disabilities, often we find that polling places, precincts where you actually vote is not physically accessible. We are working on that, and we're making polling places more accessible every day. Every day, a polling place comes into accessibility or is moved. And so we want to avoid the situation where a person who couldn't previously access their polling place comes to vote finally because their polling place is accessible and finds that there's a problem with their voter registration. So we can go to the next slide. When will I vote? Currently, there is no early voting period. We had an early voting period, quite a long one actually, 6 weeks in 2020. And that was a special dispensation that was due to COVID because we wanted to avoid the long lines. We wanted to allow people room to social distance. And the legislature thought that that was a good accommodation to have because of the pandemic. Now, there is currently some chatter about having an early voting period. Is that currently the law? It is not. So currently, right now, we have no early voting period. That may well change before Election Day. We will be shouting that from the rooftops. We are very excited about the prospect of an early voting period. So kind of stay tuned about that. That is something that we will be communicating to folks in a big, big way if we have an early voting period before the general election. The way it's written now is that it would currently only be for the general election in November, not the primaries. So kind of keep your ear open for that. However, if you're a person with a disability, you can vote absentee in person 30 days before the election day up until 5 p.m. the day before. And that takes place at your county election office. So you can apply to vote absentee. There's an application process, which we'll talk about when we talk about by mail voting in a little bit more depth. But if you have a disability and you want to vote in-person absentee, you can fill out the application and then vote that same day. So just if you're concerned about when that period starts, where to go, give us a call or give your county election office a call. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Where's my polling place? So we're going to come back to this SC Votes screen. I'll take this opportunity to talk a little bit about some of the things that they offer on the SC Votes website because it is pretty comprehensive. You can do a lot of things. Where is my polling place? So about midway down, you put find my polling place, and that'll tell you where your precinct is and where you are going to vote if you're voting on election day. If you want to vote in-person absentee, that's going to be your county office. So you can go down to the bottom and put in contact my county office, and that'll give you the contact information for your county election office. Also available on the screen is you can go do your online voter registration. Obviously, we talked about checking your voter registration, updating my voter registration. Very important if you've moved, if you have a different address, because you're going to have some updated information to look at as far as where you're going to go. You can get a sample ballot on this website, which is nice if you're trying to kind of get your mind around how voting is going to go and who is going to be on the ballot. Find my polling place, get my absentee application, which we're going to talk a little bit about next. Check my absentee ballot. We're going to talk a little bit about the difference between an absentee application and an absentee ballot. And then you can also check on the status of your provisional ballot, which we'll talk a little bit about. So this is kind of a one-stop shop. This is the site for all the state election commission and kind of everything that's going on with elections statewide. So it's an excellent resource, and we'll have it up in a resource section a little bit later on. So we can move on. Voting absentee. This is how a lot of our clients choose to vote. And there are two ways to do it. We talked a little bit about voting absentee in person, and that's when you go fill out your absentee application and vote at your county office. And that is in person. It is on the same voting machines that you would vote on were you to vote on election day. So we'll talk a little bit about those machines and some of the accommodations that are available on those machines when we talk about voting on election day, but they will be the same machines. And there are also a lot of videos on our website and on the State Election Commission's website that talk about how to use those machines, what to expect when you come to vote, and kind of the accommodations that are available on those machines. Again, those resources will be up at the end of the presentation. Voting absentee by mail requires an application returned by 5 p.m. 4 days before the election. That's kind of a soft deadline. That's the absolute last minute that you can apply to vote absentee. Do it sooner. Do it now. You can request all your absentee ballots for every election for the whole year if you have a disability at once, and they will be sent to you 30 days before before the election. So there's no need to wait. If you're sure that voting by mail or voting absentee is the way that you're gonna want to vote, please do it sooner rather than later. We all know what's going on with the mail service. Mail is taking longer. And things can happen, and you want to give yourself enough time to check the status of things and see what's going on, and make sure you've kind of crossed your T's and dotted your I's so that you're able to vote as you want to. Then you receive an absentee ballot after your application is received. Then they send them out. The election the Election Commission says that they attempt to send those absentee ballots out about a month before election day. Consider that things might happen in 30 days. If you're really on the fence about a candidate, you might not want to vote that early. It might be the most convenient way, but that's another drawback to the absentee process. You don't have to turn it in immediately, but you really want to do it as soon as possible. You have to have a witness sign your ballot before returning. This was one thing that the requirements for that went back and forth before the 2020 election, but currently you have to have a witness sign your ballot. You have to swear an oath that you are who you say you are. And then you have to have a witness sign the ballot before returning it, pledging that there was no funny business in the completion of that ballot. I do not see that changing as a requirement before this election. So plan on having a witness. And then please check the status of your absentee ballot. Again, anything can happen with the mail. Things can even happen if you go and turn it in person yourself. You just want to make sure it's important, and you want to leave yourself enough time to remedy that before the election. So please, 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 if you have voted absentee by mail, please go online and check the status of your ballot. Okay, we can move along. Who can turn in my absentee ballot? So you can turn in your absentee ballot by mail, or you can drop it off in person. Remember to have that witness statement signed and everything you need. You can give it to somebody else to drop off at your county election office. They have to fill out an authorization form that's available on the State Election Commission's website, that same website, scvotes.gov. You're just going to go to the voting absentee portion of the website, and everything is there for you. So this, if you give it to a family member, that's fine. They need to fill out the form. If you give it to, a caregiver or somebody else, they have to fill out the form to be able to legally turn in your absentee ballot. There are special rules if the voter is hospitalized or incapacitated close to election day. The rules are looser. If you have questions about that, if you are a person who, is kind of in and out of the hospital and you want to make sure that everything is taken care of, please give us a call and we'll talk through your options. I can tell you now, I'm gonna encourage you to vote earlier rather than later, but it is kind of contemplated in the laws that somebody might be hospitalized near to election day and might need some accommodations for that. So we can discuss that if you think that might be a possibility for you. We can go to the next slide. Curbside voting. I want to say curbside voting is wonderful. A lot of our clients use it. You will hear people say, well, it's fine that the precinct is not accessible because people with disabilities can vote curbside. If you want to take advantage of curbside, that is your right. That is what it's there for as a person with a disability. But that does not remove any responsibility of the county to have those polling places accessible. So we have seen instances where a person with a disability would very much have liked to have voted inside at their precinct, but were unable to access the precinct physically. Even if you successfully completed a curbside ballot, we want to know about that. So please, if that is your experience or has been your experience with curbside, give us a call, because we want to make sure that counties are aware that curbside is not something that they can point to as a reason or a remedy for an inaccessible polling place. If you have a disability, you can vote curbside. It should be well marked. It should have one of these signs like we have in the picture that indicates where the spot is that you're supposed to be voting with. And you can vote from your car. You don't have to exit your car. The rule is that there will be either a bell to ring that is reachable from the driver's side, or someone should be checking that spot every 15 minutes. Does that always happen? In a perfect world, it would. It does not always happen, especially when there are long lines, like in a general election. Sometimes it's just not monitored the way it should be. We would encourage you to call your county office or to call us if you're having a problem like that. So curbside gets a little complicated, and we think that I find it to be my responsibility to explain how curbside works, and so you can decide whether or not that's the best option for you. So the new voting machines that we had in 2020 have kind of a part A and a part B of the machine. This is kind of how I explain it. Every precinct has a bunch of part A's, and that's the part with the touch screen that you feed your ballot into, and you make your choices, and then it spits the ballot back out and you can review your choices. So they have tons of those, and that's what they'll bring out to you when you vote curbside. So it's very light. It's not, the old ones were very bulky. This can be sit comfortably in a lap. The poll manager can hold it for you. Then part B of the machine is the part where you feed your ballot in, you review your choices, and you actually cast your ballot. Your paper ballot goes into a lockbox, and that's all contained in part B. The precincts don't have as many part Bs, and those machines are not as mobile as the part A of the machine. So in order to vote curbside, what you're going to do is you're going to put your ballot in an envelope. You're going to hand that ballot to election staff. There should be two people taking possession of your ballot, and then they feed your machine and actually cast your ballot for you. Lots of people are perfectly comfortable with this. I am sure that it happens as it's supposed to every time. I have no reason to think it doesn't, but if that makes you a little uncomfortable, you might want to rethink curbside voting and take advantage of a different method of voting. Another thing to mention is that voting curbside guarantees you a place in line. So you pull up. What a lot of precincts do is they hand the last person who is physically in the precinct a piece of paper indicating that the next voter is a curbside voter. So it might take as long as waiting inside. So just something to know, that curbside, you could be waiting a while if there's a big line inside the precinct. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Voting in person. If you choose to vote in person on election day, please know that you are owed accommodations that allow you to vote privately and independently. The first thing is that you are entitled to be able to physically access your polling place. If you cannot physically get into your precinct, things like there's a really steep parking lot and you are a wheelchair user and you can't climb the hill basically to get up to the polling place. If it's not paved over, if there aren't adequate ramps, if you need an elevator, once you get inside, if it's not set up to be maneuverable to you, please call your county election office or Disability Rights South Carolina. The only thing that's bad about that is that now here you are on election day, can't physically access your precinct, and we have to kind of try and resolve that situation in real time. So think about that. You know, if it involves, you know, kind of riding by your precinct and taking a look at the parking lot and seeing if that's something you think you're comfortable with, that might be a good idea. But there are limits to what we can do to help you on election day. We can make calls and things like that. But that takes time. And it's not always feasible for somebody to wait for issues to get resolved on the day of. When you go to vote in person, the machines have a lot of accessibility features. My colleague, Maggie Knowles, was involved in choosing these machines. So they had input from us when they were choosing the machines in terms of what was going to be best for people with disabilities. And I think that we all agree that the machines are a vast improvement over what we had. Things like headphones should be available to access an audio ballot. There's an input for a sip and puff switch. There's a braille embossed controller. You can make adjustments for contrast if you have a visual disability. And those things should be, the people who are working should be able to kind of tell you about them. If you have headphones that you prefer, you should be able to have those and use them with the machines. They're very, very accessible. I think they're a vast improvement over what we had, especially in terms of people with visual disabilities. I think there are a lot more aspects to the machine that make it much easier for people with visual disabilities to vote, including the ease of using the audio ballot. You will need an ID to vote in person. What counts as an ID to vote in person? Your driver's license, certainly, your state issued identification card that's not a driver's license, your military ID, your passport. Your voter registration card will count if it has a photo on it. If you just have your voter registration card, my personal voter registration card does not have a photo on it. So what you can do is you can have that. If you're somehow unable to obtain ID, disability is an acceptable reason for that. You can fill out a form and cast a provisional ballot. A provisional ballot is a ballot that you can fill out and cast if there's some sort of issue with your identification or your registration when you come to the polls. So say I go in, I say I'm registered, I went, you know, I took Aaron's advice and went and checked on my registration on scvotes.com, scvotes.gov, excuse me, said everything was cool. I came in and they can't find it. And I know I registered to vote. Or, you know, I have my voter registration card, but I was not able to get an ID. that is satisfactory to the staff at the location, you can cast a provisional ballot. And that means that's a ballot that they count once your issue has been resolved, once they go back and check and make sure that you actually are registered, that you are who you say you are. So please know that that is your right to cast that kind of ballot, even if there's telling you that there's some sort of issue with you casting your vote. Please, please, please assert your right to cast that provisional ballot. It's essentially, I'm going to cast this ballot because this is the one opportunity that I have to do it, and we can verify later. And that's what will happen with that kind of ballot. We can go to the next slide. Check how I'm doing on time. Pretty good. Who can come with me to the polls? When you're voting in person, whether that's curbside or absentee in person or on election day, you can bring someone to assist you. You can also request that an election worker provide assistance, but you do have to ask. You do have to say, can I have some headphones, or can you help me find the switch, or something like that? Can you assist me in adjusting the contrast, something like that. You do have to ask for assistance, but you can have somebody with you to provide that assistance, or you can ask that somebody there help you. If you're voting curbside, that applies too, but it's worth mentioning, if that person you have with you isn't eligible to vote curbside as well, they need to go inside to vote. Now, curbside, nobody should be asking you for proof of disability or anything like that. So please know that that's not a thing. But if somebody is in your car who isn't eligible to vote curbside, they have to go inside to vote. And again, curbside guarantees you a spot in line, so consider that it might take as long as waiting in line inside. We have heard stories that some poll managers like to kind of get through their curbside lines so that they're not monitoring it as much. I have never seen this. I have always seen that curbside gets you kind of a spot in line. So please, when you're making your voting plan, consider that it might be a significant amount of time that you're waiting, even though you're taking advantage of curbside voting. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Important dates for 2022. These are the biggies. June 14th is the statewide primary. So May 16th, that's a Monday, 30 days falls on a Saturday. So you have until the Monday. And these are postmark deadlines. If you are registering in person, you need to do it by May 16th. If you're mailing in your registration, it has to be postmarked by May 16th. So get that thing to the post office by 5, whenever the last pickup is. Or just do it now and don't wait till the last minute. That's always nice too. But things happen. October 10th, another Saturday situation. So that Monday is the last day to register for the general election. Like I said, if you need help registering, if you need us to send you a registration form, you're kind of at home most of the time, we can send you a registration form. You can get one from the state election commission website. There are lots of ways to do it. We are just a good kind of one-stop shop to talk about all these issues, whether it's, we can talk through your registration, we can talk through your voting plan, where your precinct is, how you think you're going to vote, what makes sense for you individually. But just keep those dates in mind. There's really no negotiation about registration dates. If you wait till the 17th, we can't say, we can't go to the state commission and say, we had problems with the mail or something like that. They're pretty hard and fast deadlines. And we can go to the next slide. Resources. These are my 3 favorite resources for voting in the state. scvotes.gov. That is the state election website. The counties have their own websites and have some particular information, and you can get to those sites through this scvotes.gov website. That is going to be where you're going to go to register to vote, to request an absentee ballot, to apply to vote absentee, to find a schedule of elections. That's where you're going to find the information about dates for your municipal elections, your local elections, that are very, very critical in the state as well. It's pretty easy to navigate. It's almost accessible. So that it really is a good reference for all things elections in the state. Our disabilityrightssc.org has a lot of voting resources as well. We have a lot of videos that are helpful in terms of walking you through the absentee process, walking you through voting on the new machines. And they're all accessible. We can verify that. All the videos have ASL and captions. So that's a good place to start as well if you're just kind of curious about what to expect when you go to vote. And then vote411.org is a site that is done by the League of Women Voters. They're a nonpartisan organization that exists in all the states. You can narrow down to South Carolina. I think this site has the easiest graphics in terms of dates and telling you what might be on the ballot. So that's a great resource for myself. I use it all the time. And I just think it's very, very easy to navigate. They do a good job of making it simple. And we can go to the next slide. So I'm Erin here. If you need to get in touch, please do get in touch. I like talking about voting. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. I'm happy to go through and talk about the advantages and disadvantages of these methods of voting. This is our general line. You're going to reach intake and referral staff. If you have just like a quick question about some sort of voting mechanism, they might be able to help you, or you might get to me. If you'd rather talk to me, just tell them that and they'll get you on over to me. We have a TTY line, 866-232-4525. If you need that, please call and leave a message if you're after hours and tell us a good time to call you back, and we'll make that happen. If you're at work 9 to 5, we can work something out, no problem. info@disabilityrightssc.org if you prefer email, if that's easier. That gets to the same INR staff and they'll just forward that right on over to me, and we can communicate via email if that's better. And then our general website, you can get to the voting page, but there's just a lot of really good information about a whole lot of service areas and things that we do at that website. Okay, so I think, we've got about 15 minutes left. Definitely open it up for questions. I don't know if there are a whole lot of folks in the session, but if there are, please ask them. And if not, we will get you out of here a little early. But thanks everybody for coming, and do look for this on our website once we can get it equipped with captions and make sure everything's accessible. And that goes for all the sessions as well. So the last month's session on guardianship, next month's on accessible housing will eventually be on our YouTube channel and Facebook page. Maggie, we got anything? I think maybe not. Well, that's okay. Really, voting is a very, very personal thing. My dad wants to go in person and vote as on election day. He loves that. He loves the camaraderie. He's gotten to know the ladies who work at our precinct. I myself, as a person who works on election day, I take advantage of in-person absentee. I go and vote early. And so that's just to say that the methods of voting and the way you vote is very personal. And we want to make sure that everybody with a disability in South Carolina can vote in a way that they're most comfortable with, that makes them feel good about participating in the process, and where they're really confident about their vote, making it and counting. So if that's it, look for this online. Also, I think it's worth mentioning to kind of keep in mind that there might be some changes that come up to the way that we're voting leading up to the general. So just kind of keep that in mind, and every once in a while check in with the Facebook page and check in with the newsletter, because that's where we're going to be giving updates. All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming, and please do tune in next month to hear us talk about housing, right? That's the one, Maggie?
That is the one. And also we put a link to the survey in the chat box. So if you please take just a moment to fill out that survey on the presentation. That way we can continue to provide you the resources that you need and want to see from us. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.